Some are, though, and I have to give credit to the people who are willing to put themselves out there and say, you know what, it is or not. And at some point we have to face the facts and admit that what has been taught in the past has been void of cultural input from the people who it was based upon. Thank you. So I talked for a long time, but I already have a hand.
I think a good point before. You said that most classes that we take, we're not going to hear the full truth, or we're only going to hear what they were taught. Where can we go to find out actual cultural history?
That is a very hard question to answer. I'm not going to say that no professors, no historians know or will teach that. Most of the scholarship that is available out there has been based upon the previous concepts and theories, and so you have to take it with a grain of salt. Obviously, you have to pass your classes, you have to get your grades, and I understand that, but you have to take it with a grain of salt because it is, as I said before, like throwing a dart at a dartboard. Some of the information can be on the money, but without everything else that paints the whole picture, it's kind of lost. So just be aware of that. Be aware of some of the bias. Beware of the fact that most of the theories up to this day have been based upon early observations from the early English settlers, or from the Dutch, or from the French folk that settled in the area, that were not anthropologists, that were not equipped to be able to kind of study a culture without putting their religious belief, bias, or their, whatever they had with them, whatever baggage they carried with them. You can read it when you read those early accounts. If you read English writings from the 1600s, every single thing we did was devil worship. Kind of hard to have that practice when we don't have a word for or a concept of the devil. So, you have to question most of the things that were recorded early on. Most of the things, like the fact that Wampanoag people, Narragansett people, the nations in this area were matrilinear. And so women held high position in government. They were the head of the household. You'll never read that, or you'll very seldomly read that in any English writing, because, of course, they weren't that way. They were extremely patriarchal. Women had no status. And the early writings talk about, one man talks about going down to Virginia to get some pigs and a wife. So you have to question, how well someone would, from that kind of thinking, where you just got a woman because you always had to have a woman, because you always had to have huge families to carry on your name and to get resources. That's not going to translate well. An Algonquian perspective on, equality isn't going to translate to a people who come from that kind of thinking. Your best bet is to connect with everyone, connect with the native people in an area that you're studying about, and hear their oral traditions, hear their side of the story, hear what they know, as well as look at the archaeological information that is available. Because a lot of times the archaeological information that is actually being studied and the information that's coming out of what's going on right now is not made available to you for 20, 30, 40 years. It doesn't make its way into this world here to, you might be teaching. So it's a little late.
Sorry to interrupt you for a few moments. We have another speaker here to speak on the behalf of Native culture also. His name is Darrell Waldron. He is part of the Rhode Island Indian Council.
No, that's fine.
Hi. Yeah. If you guys would like, you can, cooperate and yeah.
I think there was actually a mistake today.
A little miscommunication, but it's more.
I know there's not a lot of time left. And as I was listening to what he was saying, you realize that topic's kind of a little bit different. I work at the Rhode Island Indian Council in Providence, which is 4 states wide. We have a center in Rhode Island, one in New Jersey, one in Connecticut, one in Delaware. And we primarily work with a very large population of off-reservation as well as on-reservation, but the majority of our constituency is off-reservation. And we're sort of the benefits of Indian rights, sovereignty, and the struggle for the right to self-govern. And we were developed around the 1960s. My center was in the 70s, but the first urban Indian center was in the 60s, and it was in Chicago. The last relocation project, where they took a group of Indians and literally moved them to another area, was Chicago around 1964, and it was the birth of the Indian centers. And so I don't know what happened with the scheduling, but I was supposed to talk after sovereignty and then the programs that have been developed and the things that kind of are going on today versus the historical qualities of our people. So I'm like 500 years after the talk today. But I could answer a lot of questions, and I could talk just a little teeny bit about some of the stuff that's going on. And, the majority of all, as you've heard many times, treaties have been broken. The Native American community nationally looks just like you today in age. They're primarily young, 26 and under, accounts for over 60%. The interest in self-government is probably leaning and where they want everything that every young person wants. College education is within reach for some and out of reach for others. The tribal-based colleges that are in the western part of the United States are tribally owned and tribally run. Some of them are very good. Some of them are mediocre. Some are still working with education levels at the 4th and 5th grade to prepare them for standard college education. The larger reservation programs that are probably 6 to 11 million acre reservations are very much isolated. BIA accounts for about 10% of the total Indian education. Other than that, Native people are taking on their own education issues through scholarships and through educating their own. There's a major, what we call brain drain nationally in the community where young people like yourselves go to college and they want to go back home. How many guys want to go back home that are here, and so they're staying out and abroad, and thus the 75% of the Indian community is off reservation. So you count for a lesser degree of them that are on reservation. And of some surveys that have been out there, there's not a large interest in governing amongst the young. I think the number one trade in some data that was collected was, believe it or not, they want to be a dentist. Probably because they can work 1 hour a day and make a whole lot of money. But that was the number one trade. And so we are fighting for the rights. We have made some benefits from the fights of the earlier people, whom a lot of it started in this state. There's a couple people in this room that were very instrumental in the developments in the state. This young lady sitting in the second row, and Josh Dawn in the back. Part of the early developments in Rhode Island. A lot of it began here. First federally recognized tribe came out of the state. Any other tribe that is federally recognized copied that.